Primary webinar titled Let's Talk Feelings. My name is Nurin Musa and I am a primary school teacher and Key Stage 1 phase leader, and I've been working alongside the Boghani Education Board, supporting them with developing these primary webinars. Joining me today, I am happy to introduce two fantastic professionals who both work in the education and health sector, and between them have a great source of knowledge on education and children's psychology. Our first speaker is Seymeen Khairdin, an experienced educational psychologist currently working with Ealing Council. Our second speaker is Aliya Boghani, an experienced primary school teacher and assistant head at a school in Harrow. Before we start, I just want to go through some housekeeping rules. Please keep yourselves on mute as we are recording the webinar today, and we'd like to minimize any noise disruption as much as possible so everyone can listen to it. The aim of these webinars is to be as interactive as possible, and we would really hope that you get something from this experience. So if you do have any questions, please do write them in the comments section below, and our team will put together the questions and hopefully answer them by the end of today's session. And hopefully today, any questions that you have, it will also be very clear as to state your child's age and year group that they are in, so that our panelists can answer your questions as best they can. And the aim of today's webinar is to gain more of an understanding of coping with change and managing worries. Hopefully by the end of today's webinar, you will have some understanding of these areas. And I will pass you over to Sultana now.
Hi, Yali Madeth, everybody. My name is Sultana Ladani. I'm a member of the Aga Khan Education Board. Would just like to give a quick thank you to all of our panelists who have taken the time to speak today. I'm really grateful to have such a great panel here for you. We recognize that this is a very challenging time for families and that everyone is doing a wonderful job at this time. We really hope that you'll take away some tips from us today, and then that you can try out at home. And if you do try out any of these tips at home, please do feed back to us so we know if these have helped you and if there's anything else that we can do. If you need any support at all, please contact AKEB at any time. You can email us at akeb@iruk.org for any confidential support that you may need. During this session, we would also like to know when would be best for you for future webinars to be held. For example, would it be a weekday evening, a weekend morning, a weekend afternoon? So if you could please enter your preference into the chat box during this session, that will help us with planning for future webinars. We also have further resources and the recordings of these webinars available online on our website, Head Start. Please visit headstart.iruk.org. I'll now pass you back over to Nurin so that we can begin with the session. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sultana. So now I'll pass you over to Seymeen Khairdin, educational psychologist with Ealing Council, to help explain further the topic of well-being and managing your child's worries. Thank you, Seymeen.
Yeah, I hope you're all keeping well and safe. Realise that the current time that we're in is very unsettling for all of us, including our children. Some of our children actually are probably really enjoying this, but we're clearly here to be talking about those that are maybe finding it a little bit tougher. So in terms of the guidance that we've had so far around, us being home educators, has been very much about support well-being first. And we're going to look a little bit more in detail about why that is such a key aspect to be able to, can I go back to the previous slide?
Right. Yeah.
Thank you. So we're going to be looking at how to look at, we're going to be supporting our children through this unsettling time. We're going to be thinking about how some of our children may or may not have some of the communication skills to express how they're feeling. So we are going to have to be very observant of our youngsters and listen to them and watch what they're doing, because some of their behaviours will be communicating to us how they're actually feeling. So we need to be looking at their behaviour as a form of communication to us. And in this time, one of the key things is to be able to ensure that we are enhancing our relationship with our youngsters so they feel secure and that they're able to communicate with us and we can actually support them, that they might listen to some of the guidance or the approaches that we're actually going to be implementing to support them. We'll be looking at a very key strategy, a parenting strategy at the end of this little bit of input, which is an absolute base. If we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so why do we want to make a real strong focus on relationships? When our relationships are good, and right now in some homes, there'll be times we're not used to spending so much time together without being able to have any other outlets. So there will be times when the emotional temperature in a home is likely to get a little bit hot, and it returns again. But if our relationships are even stronger, and some families say to me, but I already have a really good relationship with my child, I often say to that parent, it's a bit like vertigo the other way around. It can always get stronger. So good relationships help our children to feel good about themselves and us. It helps them to feel safe to develop new skills. And our youngsters, while they're not at school, they're not stopping developing. They're still doing that. So it will make them feel even safer to be able to look at some of the new skills that they're developing. It will increase the likelihood of our youngster actually listening to some of the instructions that we might be giving them or the requests that we're making of them. And it will also reduce the likelihood of behaviour problems after we come out of COVID, whatever that's going to look like, from those developing. So, you know, the aim isn't just for now, it's also about holding us here on. Next slide, please. So I'd just like to take you through, some of you may already know this, so forgive me if you are familiar with this, but just like to go through a little model of the brain in the palm of our hands. Because the first thing that the brain looks for at uncertain times is a sense of security. When, I guess, imagine to yourselves that if you are feeling nervous or uncomfortable about something or have just had an argument before you've potentially gone out to work on a day, the likelihood is that you've got that concern still living with you. So yeah, emotions actually give rise to our bodies taking action. If I can take you through the actual model of the brain. So this is the brain. The first bit of the brain that develops is here, the brainstem, right at the back of your neck. This is where, as the child is in the womb, this is what's developing first, the brainstem. This is responsible for all automatic, for movement, for sensory, breathing. So this is really responsible for a lot of sensory things, and we call it the reptilian brain. So it's the oldest type of animal that grew. The next part of the brain that develops is this bit here called the emotional brain. This is responsible, or the mammalian brain, sorry, which is responsible for emotions, thinking, feeling. The final part of the brain that develops is called the supracortex. This bit here, those two strands live just behind the skull there, and they're the bits that are responsible for thinking, learning, rationalizing. However, when we are not feeling okay, we flip our lids slightly. When we're not, and this is, the downstairs brain is like the guard dog, is the bit that is checking out if there's any threat. And right now is a time of threat. We don't know what this coronavirus is going to do to us. And our youngsters are possibly feeling a little bit lifted if they're hearing us talk about things or the news, etc. It might lift a little bit. And our job is about helping our youngsters to feel regulated and bringing it all down again. When the brain is like in this position, that's when it's most able and available for thinking and learning. So like I said, if I've gone out to work on a day having had an argument with my husband, as I'm driving, I'm a little bit lifted and my thumbs are really pressing hard on the driving wheel. So it's, you know, we have to do things to be able to calm ourselves down. The key emotions that the brain developed with from years and years ago, if we're thinking about hunting gathering times, the key emotions were around anger, anxiety, disgust, sadness, and joy. All these emotions evolved as a mechanism to help us to survive. So anxiety right now, if that's what our youngsters are feeling, is not entirely a bad feeling, because it's actually getting the body ready for action. So imagine years ago, the threat might have been a lion. Now it's the coronavirus. That threat needs to be able to be managed. So if our youngsters are feeling anxious, the body is in a position of getting ready for that anxiety. The body tenses up a bit, the heart starts to beat faster. And what we're trying to do is help our youngster not to go into that fight, flight, or fright position and bring it all back down again. So there are things that we need to be able to do to help our youngsters to manage this anxiety. Some of the things that we've talked about previously, or you may hear a lot about, is helping our youngster to breathe, because what we want to do is start taking the tension out of those muscles that anxiety has put into our bodies. Start being able to calm youngsters down. So they're the kind of key steps. If we can go to the next. So before I actually look at this key strategy that I do want to share with you, just want to give you another few do's and don'ts around how you might be able to support your youngster. So firstly, when your youngster wants to communicate with you, make yourself available. If they want to come up and ask you a question, do put down tools. I guess one of the key things though is, if you are feeling really anxious at that time, not a good time, let them know that you two are a little bit worried right now, and you'll come back to it. When you do communicate with your youngster, make sure that you're using language and words that your young person knows, because otherwise they're not going to be able to connect with what you're talking about. And it's really useful to ask them open-ended questions, like asking them, what do you know about this? And through that, you'll start learning where they're at with their current concerns. Also, don't tell them, don't be silly. Don't tell them how they should be feeling, because those feelings are real. But once we know what those feelings are, we can start helping them to be able to manage that. The strategy that we're going to be looking at is this one element of it that's going to be very much about helping our young person to feel control, because right now this situation is making us all feel out of control in some ways. And the current strategy of washing hands is actually a really good one for having control, because it's about helping us to feel that we can do something, that we are in control of being able to manage. So being able to get your youngster to wash hands, it's about being in control of being able to actually manage the situation right now. A few other do's and don'ts: manage the information. There's so much information out there. Our youngsters may be able to understand some of it, may not be able to understand some of it. So managing that is really important for us, and that includes the conversations that the adults might be having. We need to think about, are all of those conversations suitable for our young people to be hearing? Managing routines, key, because routines are the things that make life have sense. If there's chaos, things are less predictable. So our young person knows less about what is actually expected of them or what might be coming next. So routines are really key. And in terms of going back to what the brain stores and the current time that can make us feel worried or anxious, it's really useful to be able to have some maybe photographs, or keep a scrapbook or something like that, where we're going to remember the good things that came out of this time, because our youngsters are not going to stop their development. So it might be useful to hold on to things like some of the paintings that they did. Some of our youngsters might learn to tie their shoelaces or how to brush their teeth. So maybe something that's going to remind us of, actually, during that time we were at home, I learned this. I have to say, for me, I'm in the kitchen and I'm learning things, new recipes that I'm not a big fan in the kitchen, but I'm learning to enjoy being in the kitchen. Some youngsters might have worries that you might want to use something called a worry box, particularly before they're going to sleep. It's often at that time that those worries increase. And because while the young person is awake and while our children are busy and engaged in useful activity, their mind is occupied. It's at night time that sometimes these worries take over our minds, we can reflect on ourselves, that, we ruminate, these things go over and over in our minds. So it's quite useful before going to bed, having a little worry box where your young person, or you write it down for them, whatever their worry is, put it in the box. So now the young person doesn't have to keep holding on to that worry. It's in the box, it's there. They can go to sleep in a more settled way. In the morning, have a look at that worry. Is it still a worry? Then we need to look at it in more detail. If it's no longer a worry, that's fine, it's gone. Really important, another strategy to be able to have some fun with our youngsters. The tip that we're going to be looking at in more detail will be looking at that. But it might be useful to be thinking about doing board games or other games that possibly have some rules, because right now our youngsters might not be as used to having to wait a turn or to be taking turns even. So having some ways that's going to keep them in those kind of structured activity, taking turns, settling disputes, managing, winning, losing, they'll be really good for when we come out of COVID and our youngster is ready to go back to school. And I guess another big thing is, having some positive thoughts. So being able to connect with things that have made us laugh or make us happy through the day as well. Now, if I can just share with us this particular tip, it's very much about helping to connect with our youngsters. And some youngsters at this time might be, some parents are commenting that they're really attention seeking and they don't quite know how to manage the amount of attention that the young person is wanting or needing. So this tip is very much about going in with the child at their level, following what they want to do, because sometimes we as parents turn those opportunities of when we're playing into a teaching opportunity. So this is nothing to do with teaching. This is completely about our two hearts connecting. So the first aim of this is for our youngster to be able to have attention and let go, and for our youngster to be able to have control and let go. This is a strategy about helping our youngsters to spend 5 to 10 minutes of quality time with us on an individual basis. Really important, if you decide that you're going to be spending 5 minutes, it's 5 minutes every day, or as frequently as you can, because this is like a muscle. The more you practice it, the stronger it will get. Don't say 5 minutes one day, 7 minutes the next day, because your youngster needs to start learning to have some sense of idea how long that 5 minutes feels. So keep it consistent. This strategy is also about strengthening the relationship between us and our child. And again, like we said, it will increase the likelihood of our youngsters being compliant for some of the directions that we might be giving them. But actually, this strategy is very much about developing our young person's self-esteem and self-worth also. So choose the time frame. The rules are: choose a time frame. Ensure that you are following the young person's interest, their agenda. Your child is the boss for this time, not you, and you can't be turning it into a teaching opportunity. So what some families do is have a little box or a bag of things ready that they know their young person likes to do. I always find bubbles and Play-Doh are brilliant in here, whatever age your child is. And those things only come out at the time that you are going to be working with your youngster. So it's about creating some magic in that relationship between all you and me games. So, it's creating that bit of magic. So if your young person really enjoys bubbles and really likes the color red, put some red bubbles in that box, but those red bubbles don't come out any other time of day. Some families couldn't live without bubbles during the day, so blue bubbles, yellow bubbles, green bubbles can come out at the other times. But that one is about magic between you and me. So prepare your box. Also, be sure that you're doing this at a time when your young person is able to let go of it. Some people say, oh, let's watch a TV program together. It's not the ideal thing because it's not about you two interacting together, but sometimes TV programs can't finish within the 5 minutes that you've chosen. So if you're going to switch it off at that point, you're likely to be raising the emotional temperature. And the other tip around this, or rule around this, is to make sure that there's no winning or losing activities in there, and there's nothing that's going to cause a physical hurt or an ouchie. And I say this particularly to dads because sometimes rough and tumble play does end up in us becoming a little bit hurt, and then the young person's not going to want to play with you again or remembers the ouchie, as opposed to being able to actually connect with you. So they're the key, a really key base strategy to be able to help us to be able to manage at this time. Thank you. You can go to the next slide.
Okay. Thank you, Seymeen. Here are some questions that we have parents have requested some answers to, just for some suggestions and further clarification. So question 1, how can I help my child to talk about their worries at this uncertain time? If we can direct that question to you, Seymeen.
Okay, so as we've already said, listen to your child. When they want to speak to you, make yourself available. I think that's really important, to make yourself available. If you are feeling very anxious yourself at that time, or are not in a place to be able to respond, then let them know that. But try, as soon as you recognize that you are feeling in a better place, try to go to your young person and say, do you remember that question you asked me? Or you wanted to know a little bit more about that? Go back to that. And some things we may not have the answers to. So you could say, you know what, I'm not sure, let's find that out together. So being able to actually talk to our youngster, keep it open. And in fact, from the time that we started talking about this seminar or this webinar, things have changed. We're in another 3-week lockdown. So we know that with COVID, things are going to be continuously changing. In terms of things like, how long will my school be closed for? We're really going to be guided by our establishments, by our schools, our colleges, our nurseries, when that time is going to be. So don't get yourselves too worried or anxious about that bit, because there will be communication with you to be able to manage that time. But again, relay that to our children. It's okay, your school's going to tell us what they're going to do. In fact, tomorrow is the start of a new term, and some schools will be in looking at how they're going to be able to connecting with you.
And if we, Aliya, if we could get your input on any information of how schools are answering questions for parents, because I think there's a lot of heightened anxiety from parents about how long school will be closed for, not just for children as well.
Yeah, sure. So right now, like Seymeen said, we don't know when schools are opening, and we will be guided by establishments. In terms of schools, there are lots of ways for you to still communicate with your school. I know lots of schools are updating their websites regularly. They're still sending out newsletters. Some schools are sending out surveys and how they can support families. For children, there is online learning platforms where they can access those and be in touch with their teachers and their friends. And so if you're worried about your child and you want them to talk about their emotions, they may not directly want to speak to you, but may feel more comfortable talking to their teachers about this. So whatever communication that your teachers are offering, take that up so that your child can speak to their teachers. They're more likely to open up in a forum there, either through email or through a chat forum, through their school's website or through their school's learning channel. What I would say is use reliable information. Don't rely on social media to give information to your child. Use reliable sources and be positive, and at the same time reassure your child whilst being honest.
And so following on from that, a lot of children are missing their school friends. Is there anything schools suggest, or even as a parent point of view, Seymeen or Aliya as a teacher, the best way to stay in touch with their friends and guidelines on that?
So some schools have already got sessions set up with Zoom, for example, where the class teacher can get all their children together online. If that's not happening at your school, there are ways for your teachers to contact your children and vice versa, either via email or through the phone. If your school's not doing any of those things, make suggestions to your head teacher or to your school. All schools are listening to parents right now. They're trying to see what are the easiest ways for their children to communicate with each other. So make suggestions, read the online newsletters that are available to you. And even if your school is not doing those things, you can do those things at home yourself. You can set them up with your friends. They don't just have to be school friends. They could be community friends. They could be neighbours. Set those calls up if you want to, and if that works for your child. Remember, not all children are going to want to talk on the phone. They're not used to getting on the phone and talking to each other for a few minutes here and there. They're used to playing with each other. So you can set up things where you might do a quiz night together as a family, or set up a board game or some sort of interactive activity over Zoom or over the phone that the children can take part in.
Thank you for that. Our next question is to you, Aliya. A lot of parents have asked what they can do to support their children's learning further at home during this unprecedented time.
Okay, so the first thing is to be positive about learning. Create a routine, like Seymeen has said. There needs to be structure, there needs to be routine. The child needs to know when it's learning time and when it's not learning time. And at the same time, I'd say be realistic about your expectations. You know, children are used to learning for 5 or 6 hours a day in a school day. This is not a school day, this is learning from home. So if you're expecting your child to be learning for that many hours each day, it's probably not going to happen. So set a realistic goal, whether it's an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours of learning that you want your child to do in that day. Have a dedicated learning space. If it's possible at home, have a set area, tables and chairs, or a different room where learning only takes place in that area. I'd also encourage learning when you know your child's ready to learn. Just touching on what Seymeen said, if your child is not in the mode to learn, is not feeling in a way, in a responsive way to learn, they won't learn. So pick the right time that works for you and works for them. So maybe set the routine up with the child, plan the day ahead or plan the week ahead with that child. In terms of what can you do to support your child's learning, lots of schools are setting online tasks for your child to do. Again, sit with your child, make sure they understand, they know what is expected, what they have to do, so that they can independently have a go at doing it. Try not to give the answers away. It's very easy for us as adults when we're feeling frustrated, we don't have time, there's lots going on, that you just want to tell your child what to do and expect them to get on with it. That's not learning. You can support your child, give them ideas, give them tips, let them have a go, but also let them know that you're available for help and support. If you feel your school's not doing as much online learning that you would like, there are lots of areas that you can tap into. So there are lots of celebrities doing reading, online reading, reading to your children, recommending books. Reading is essential to your child's development in terms of school, so make sure they are reading daily. There's lots
Sorry to interrupt you there, Aliya. I just wanted to reiterate that point about reading. As a Key Stage 1 practitioner, I can't emphasize enough how much reading really does support learning. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to agree with your point.
Absolutely key. No matter what age your child is, reading is key. And it's not just reading from a book, you know, there are audio books available. You can read to your child. That can be an activity that you choose to do together as part of a bedtime routine or just a chill out time in the afternoon. And it just doesn't have to be a child's book. It can be a magazine, it can be a newspaper, it can be somebody's blog that they're really interested in. Reading comes in many different forms. There's lots of apps, there's lots of games out there that your children can access, whether it's maths-based, spelling-based, or just interactive-based. You know, learning doesn't just have to be in terms of books and paper and pencil. It can be through different activities, whether it's cooking with you and you teaching them how to do something, you teaching how to sew, or even just tackling a game that they're not sure how to approach or how to solve a puzzle. These are all different skills that our children need to be successful in the world. So why not have a go at those things as well?
And I think what you said, Aliya, about building on those life skills are essential to enhancing the core learning skills, like cooking in the kitchen, learning about measurements in the garden or on the balcony, looking at shapes, looking at angles. And it's also that language link, developing your language and your vocabulary. Choose a word of the day, see how many times in the day you can use that new word. Can you use it in a sentence? Can you write a sentence? Would you agree?
Yeah, I'd completely agree. But it's also finding out what your children's interested in, what their passion is. For example, if your child's artistic, why not just go online and find something that teaches them that's something artistic, whether it's learning how to sketch or learning about color and tones. There's so much out there that you could do with your child, but just base it on their interests. But remember that learning does not have to take place all day, every day. Do what you can and make it manageable, make it fun, and make it positive for them.
Thank you, Aliya.
Can I just add something to what Aliya said? in terms of the right time, it's some of the guidance is having learning little sessions right the way through the day rather than just that solid hour, because often that will be less productive and your young person is more likely to be in that position than that position. So interspersing it through the day. A little rule of thumb is whatever age your child is, times it by 2 or 3. So, and that becomes minutes. So if your child is 6, times that by 2, about a 12-minute session to 12 to 18 minutes is probably the maximum amount of time they will be able to give focus for. So that's a good rule of thumb of how long you should be making focus time. And the whole business around having a dedicated space, great. But like Noreen said, also you can go out in the garden, or you can, if you've gone for a walk, you can be counting what you've seen, etc. Because you can also build in some relaxation with that, which again keeps the brain in that position. And the more fun we can have with it, the more likelihood is that our young person is taking it on.
Thank you, Seymeen. I think we covered how to manage working from home, Aliya. Thank you very much. Seymeen, again, I don't know if you wanted to just emphasize on what parents might be feeling as well. You have spoken on that. Is there something you just wanted to, so parents have a little tip just to manage that?
This is I think working from home, managing our children's needs as well as our own needs, I think it's really important that we also as parents take care of ourselves. So be able to have time when you do have some downtime. And again, that routine really helps when the young person possibly knows that this is time for me to be able to do whatever. Obviously, we still need to have supervision and be taking care of our young person, but it might be that when you set them up with a fun activity, you can just sit back for a few minutes. So, and the routines and having those structures is very key in being able to manage the home and the school aspect.
Thank you, Seymeen.
Can I just say, just from a school point of view, schools are very aware of the pressures that families are facing at home. So from their point of view, whilst they're setting work and they want your children to still develop and keep up with their learning, your child's well-being is the most important for them right now. So they would rather that your child comes back to school happy, healthy, in a good way, rather than worrying about learning and I did this and I didn't do that, because they can always catch up with your child's learning when they're back into school mode and school routine. Right now, the focus should be about your child's well-being.
Absolutely. Keeping the brain in that position is the most important thing, because that's when our young person is also going to be more ready for whatever new changes are coming. So I think there's something about managing this time with us as parents or as adults, showing acceptance of the current situation, and also that as things change, that we're accepting that and we help our young person to be able to accept that as well through our actions.
Thank you. Seymeen, we just got a question. How do parents balance their time when they're home learning with siblings who have different ages to avoid arguments and heightened emotions? For example, if you have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old, how would be the best way to balance the home learning and manage the different age groups? Seymeen or Aliya, if you'd like to jump in.
I guess in terms of managing different children's age needs, there are key principles. It will look different in every home. So I guess if we're saying to be able to think about what age your child is, how much focus time is your child actually going to be able to spend? So your 4-year-old, the maximum focus time that you should be doing with that person, that youngster at any point in time, is what, about 8 to 10 minutes. So you know that you're going to be spending maybe about 10 minutes with that young person on something really focused as a learning activity, and then they can go off and do something else. Maybe that's the time that you switch then to be able to work with your slightly older child. Think about how much time that's going to be. So if you're giving yourself an hour to be able to spend with your youngsters, as well as having an awareness of, you've got your own, if you're working from home, you've got your own tasks to be doing. So you know that in that hour, you're going to be doing 2 or 3 hits with each youngster. That's one way of being able to keep a routine, structure, and your young person knows it's only going to last this long, and then I can go do something else. And then I might be coming back again. I don't know if that answers that question, or if Aliya, you want to say any more?
Just touching on that is, when you're setting that routine, bring your children include your children in that conversation. So you might say to the 8-year-old, right, for half an hour, I'm going to focus on so-and-so. Whilst that's happening, you can choose an activity. These are your choices. Have a go at doing that. But this will then be uninterrupted time that I have with my 4-year-old to work on something. And then again, vice versa. When your 4-year-old is able to do something independently, whether that's watching TV, playing on the iPad, playing a game, it is then that quiet time for you to spend with your 8-year-old on their schoolwork for that half an hour. Bring them into that conversation so that they have an understanding when you're working with one child that that's dedicated time to them, and I will get my time later to work with mum or dad or whoever it is that's working with them.
Thank you.
And there may be some activities that they can actually come together. So if you're doing some number work, your younger one might be doing it slightly differently to your older one, but they're both doing some kind of number work. So there may be some activities that you can actually sit together and work through together.
And it's also a good way of peer teaching. The older child can help the younger child with reading or with their work, and and the younger child could also show the older child something, or they could do a project together, some learning together. Thank you. Right, next to our next question, Aliya, a lot of parents want to know, how do they support their child with returning back to school? Or there's a lot of children who are currently primary in year 6 who have, they're going to be starting secondary school, or children going into a new year group, having a new teacher. How can we support our children or our parents with this?
So right now we don't know when schools are going to open. They could open in June, they could open July, they could open September. We just don't know. Every school will be different in terms of their approach on how they settle children back into school routines. So it's best to follow that. When school does open, it's just important to make sure that you get your child ready for that moment. Talk about it in the days leading up to it so that they feel comfortable, they feel confident that this is what's going to be happening next. There are things you could do, get your child ready with sleep routines, making sure they're able to wake up early so that they're prepared for the school day, making sure their resources are ready, so their school uniforms, their stationery, PE kit. But it's also important to note that when school does open is to not have that expectation that they'll just go back straight into learning mode. This is going to be very different. It's going to take time to adjust for everyone, your teachers, yourselves, your children. And if your child is starting a new school and they are worried about it, I'm sure that schools will have an approach where they will get to introduce the children to the new school, have settling in days. There's things you could do, like looking at the school's website so that they can get familiar with the new school that they'll be going to. Talk about school in a positive way, what clubs they may want to do, what sports teams they want to join. If they know children that are also joining that school, get them talking with each other. They could be doing online activities together, they could be talking about things with each other. Just get them into a comfortable mode that they know, if they know someone that's also going to that school, that they're not going to be alone. But right now, I would say the focus shouldn't be on about going to a new school or worrying about when school's opening. Focus right now on the wellbeing at home, and when we know when schools are opening, follow the guidance that schools will give.
I think the other bit around this is that because we are in our own homes and maybe less connected than we would be otherwise, there can be a feeling of isolation. So I think letting our young person know, and ourselves know, everybody is in the same situation.
Yeah.
And the services that are supporting schools are very aware of these challenges that are being posed now, and will be working together to be able to also advise schools on possible approaches to get our youngsters ready for the new year group, for the new school, for that transfer, etc. So as that information starts coming out, that will start trickling down to you as parents as well, in terms of what we can do. to be able to prepare our youngster. So wait, and we will all be guided.
Thank you very much, Seymeen and Aliya, for your great advice and help. I'm sure parents, as I have learned something new, and I'm sure parents are going to be a lot more at ease having your input today. Are there any other tips or anything else that you would like to add as a quick little bite for parents to take with them before they sign out?
I think for me, in terms of parents, I think there is something key about taking care of yourself as well, because you're the best resource that your family has. So make sure that you are taking care of you as well as your young person's needs. Keeping it calm, keeping it as the more in that me time strategy, the more you hear laughter or giggling or any of that, you know that you're releasing some really lovely, happy hormones in the brain. So that's, you know that your young person is in that position. And sometimes after that is a nice time to be able to say, okay, when we finish this, if some of you are used to the now and next structure or when and then, when we finish this, or when we finish our me time, our special time, you can call it what you like. When we finish that, then we're going to have a little look at, and you might then be able to go into a learning situation, or flip it the other way around. Once we've finished our maths, then we're going to look at, or once we've finished digging in the garden and counting how many snails we found, then we're going to have a look at adding all that up together with some maths, etc. So I think being able to balance the fun, keeping the structures, keeping those routines are the key things.
Thank you very much, Seymeen and Aliya, for your time today. Thank you to all our parents for signing in. If you could, oh, we had one more question that I forgot about before we leave, but I think we have covered this already, Seymeen and Aliya. I think missing our friends, we spoke about. Aliya, you made a really good point about how children aren't used to speaking on the phone. So if we could move on to just to say thank you, and we will be giving out a feedback survey as we did the last webinar, and we'd be really grateful if you could complete this. And our next webinar, we hope you can join in, will be on the Sunday the 26th, and it will all be about STEM learning at home, science, technology, maths, strategies to learn at home, and please register for that. Thank you to everyone for joining in, and thank you, Seymeen and Aliya, and we hope to speak to you soon on our next webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yali Madat.
Yali Madat.